Hey guys, welcome back. It is August 22nd, 2020. And as you can see, I made some considerable visual progress since the last time. It's been a while since I posted a video. I've just been grinding away. So been getting questions about Oratex. A lot of guys are interested, so I figured I'd post a quick video on stuff that I've done and maybe a few tips and tricks and some rules of thumb as far as applying the Oratex. So far you see the fuselage is covered, belly, sides, tail. The vertical is a separate piece, although it looks like one piece all the way. Over here you see the elevator. That side already has finish tapes, that side does not. This is my very first piece, and I figure if I can do this piece, which has the tightest curves in the entire aircraft, then doing that and the wings should be a cinch. And so far I've pretty much been right, except one area which I'll show you. I covered each side with one piece. I didn't do two separate pieces like you would with a traditional system. A little bit more difficult. You just got to make sure you hit your marks a little bit better. But you can see, so these curves, just like any fabric doesn't want to really go around the curves very well. So you really got to pay attention to the curves, and you can, if you look really close, you can see some oopsies. So what I did is, you get a few puckers around the edges, you can kind of see. So you shave them down with a razor blade flush, fill it in with a little bit of glue, and then cut out these little banana pieces that go around the curve and smooths everything out. And from, even right there, you can't even tell. So there's a little bit of a trick for you. Moving over to the fuselage itself. Okay, I covered this in three pieces. I covered the belly first, obviously. You can see up here, finish tapes around what was supposed to be the little pod that Kitfox sells around those tabs. And then you can see the finish tape here and some tapes along the edge. So I covered the belly first. It took me a few hours. It goes really quick. And then I did the side with the handle first, and that was a mistake. So you lay the aircraft on the side, you cut out your rough cut, and this is going to give you trouble, and the handle is going to give you trouble. So when you lay your fabric, the fabric's going to hit a high mark here, and it's going to cause everything to distort around here. So you have to kind of guess where that handle is going to pop through and just commit to cutting a slit in the fabric to hit your mark on the razor back and then down on the bottom. It's pretty tricky. One thing about Oratex is when you do your initial gluing around the razor back and on the bottom, it looks like hell. I kind of got a little panicky, like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? What did I do wrong? But this stuff is super forgiving, and you can see it's tight. So some people have been asking me how much I should order, what order I should do it in, and my thoughts were, technically you should be doing the wings first because those are the largest pieces, but I decided to do the fuselage first, and I was able to do everything you see here. The fuselage, the elevator, and you can see the piece for the rudder, ready to go, all in 11 meters. And total, I still have 25 meters left. You can see there. And I did the math on the wings. The wings will be a traditional 2-blanket system, lengthwise. Bottom goes first, and then the top. I'll have 16 meters into the wings, which leaves me quite a bit left over. So I think they ship, or they quote you at 36 meters total. It was $7,900 for everything. 3 bottles of glue, plus a smaller bottle, which didn't make it, so they're gonna give me some store credit on that, because I'm gonna need more finishing tapes. The wax, which is super important, especially if you're gonna have a messy engine that's dripping all over the fuselage, or smoke oil, or even just exhaust stains. If you're using 100 low, that it'll stain. So you gotta wax it once a year, kind of like a car. And then you have to use non-wax stitching thread. The wax will, when you apply heat to it, the wax will cause the finish tapes to not stick, and then you're gonna have a bunch of streamers when you're flying, so that's no good. Finish tapes. Finish tapes are gonna take you longer than covering itself. You gotta be real meticulous with them. So, I guess the way, if I were to explain the process, say we're doing the belly, so the aircraft's upside down, you do your rough cut, and once you get your rough cut, you have to glue, like 2 layers of glue down on all the surfaces that it's going to contact. So like this bar here, and there's not much that it really attaches to on the belly. I've seen other guys who have sunk the fabric to where it touches. You can see there's a little bit of a gap. But I didn't want to suck the fabric because I just don't like the way that looks. So you do your 2 layers of glue on both the fabric and the piece that you're covering. Here you can see where I've marked the rudder. This would be the trailing edge of the rudder. Here's the center piece. I'm doing this in one piece as well. And then here's the other trailing piece with the ribs. For the smaller pieces, just be generous with the glue. It's not going to distort when you shrink it. In fact, the vertical, I just glued the whole thing. I just laid glue on the entire thing because I didn't want to miss, because it really sucks. There's some spots where you go to tack down and you realize that you missed a little bit of a corner where it's not glued, and it will not stick. So you have to stop, apply glue on both sides, wait for it to dry, apply again, and continue on. So anyways, you get your rough cut, you do your glue, 2 layers, and then you start to tack. And there's 2 ways you can do it. You can do it with the iron. Where's the iron? Here's the Toco iron, and they recommend using a paper towel to not cause distortion lines because there's different heating, like it's hotter in the center than it is on the edge. I don't really use iron much at all except for a universal shrink. I usually use the gun. So I set it to 210 Fahrenheit, and I just start working my way around, just tacking, starting on one side, tack all the way around, and then go to the other side, and you gotta pull it tight. So the tighter you initially pull it, the tighter the fabric will be. And I'll show you some spots where it wasn't so tight because it's just hard on these compound curves. So you get everything tacked, wrapped around the bar, or the frame, I guess. On the inside, you can see, wraps around. And then you do your initial shrink. Initial shrink is with the heat gun. Get everything just, kind of to where it's got a drum to it, nothing crazy. And then you go through with the iron, and the iron is in Celsius. And the iron goes to 160 degrees Celsius. So you do iron shrink to get all the fabric universally shrunk, because this isn't like Seconite or Superflight or any of those to where when you go to shrink, it shrinks a large area. This is very local shrinking. So the heat gun takes forever. So you do your large area universal shrink with the iron, and then you go back through with the gun. And I think the max temperature on this stuff is, you don't want to exceed 486 degrees. Don't quote me on that. It's in the manual. But I usually go to 420 degrees to leave me some wiggle room, because this airplane is going to fly in the wintertime, and I am fully expecting some slack to develop when it gets cold. Then once you final shrink, I mean, this stuff gets tight. It's just like and that's a big area too. This whole thing is just one big open area. There's no touching. So moving on to the sides, which I believe is the most difficult. It's a giant piece. It's kind of unwieldy, and it goes from the way I did it is from the bottom all the way up to the Razorback, one whole piece. And I managed to do it out of one, let's see, 7-meter piece, kind of like I orientated on the fabric, kind of like shoes in a shoebox. So you got the big fat end, and then you got your little skinny end, and then you put the other one in the opposite, and you can get it all done in one piece instead of wasting a whole bunch of material. And that's the way I did that. The troublesome area that is going to get a lot of guys is right here. This is a pain. And like I said, it looks like total hell when you go to do your initial tacking on one side. There's just wrinkles, and there's really no way to avoid it. Like I said, the stuff's forgiving. Let's see if you can see the streaks, which are only showing because of the direct light. When they're out in the sun, you can't see these. That is where fabric has been shrunk more. It kind of saturates the color a little bit. So just be weary about that when you go to do it yourself. Another spot, let's see if I can see it in the light. You can kind of see right there and right there. So yeah, just if you can do a better job than I can, then do it. It's tough. Another thing that's real tough is figuring out how you're gonna cover the tail post down there. You kind of gotta take a step back and think about the layers you're gonna put on, because when you layer it, you need to know where the glue needs to be. So you kind of gotta jump 2 steps ahead to get everything to lay down correctly. And then this piece, the Razorback finish tape right here, is a royal pain. I worked on that for about an hour, and it still, doesn't look great. It's a flat black, so it's going to show everything, but it's tough. The way they recommend is, I did it one big piece to here. I was originally going to do one whole piece, but I screwed up. The way you're supposed to do it is you're supposed to wipe the glue off, because these tapes are Oratex 600 and they're impregnated with glue. You're supposed to wipe the glue off with some acetone to remove it, and then you go back in and you only put glue on the outer portion here and there. And then when you go to tack it down, it leaves the center able to shrink tight. And it's just getting a flat piece to transition around this curve is tough. You got to put a lot of heat. And when you do the heat, you have to have something blocking the edges, because it'll start pulling the edges in. And these tapes, you can't go any higher than 320 degrees, they'll start shrinking this way. Another tip I have is, before you put your tapes on, no matter where it is, you'll have this edge. You can see where the fabric, this is the the second piece that goes over. You can see the line underneath. What you do is you run a bead of glue all the way down, and then when you put your tape down, it kind of lessens the visual impact, I guess you could say, when you put the tape down. It's not like a huge definitive line, it kind of blends it a little bit. So there's a tip for you. What else? Here's the other side of it. Oh, moving on to things that you should do before you apply covering, whether it's Oratex or not. Let's go back here and show you. The static tube and the static port goes, you can kind of see it, it's right there. With a, I believe they call it a service loop, keeps moisture from getting into the static line itself and getting in and ruining your gauges. Simple, you just glue it to the fabric, just like you would with polyfiber or Stewart systems, same thing. Just put some glue, heated it up, made sure it was nice and hot, and that thing's not going anywhere. You want to make sure all of your wires, so your trim actuator, your trim indicator, which is down there, I haven't mounted it yet, your tail beacon, and what else is there? Yeah, just those three. And then later your static joins up and you route it. You can route it however you want, but you just want to make sure that everything is nice and secured before you go to cover. And that goes up through, and then you can see them hung up there. Baggage area, you're going to want to do that first too, because you got a back drill underneath to match the mounting tabs. So that needs to be done. And I didn't mount the rubber with the sump drain little flange because I wanted to make it even with the fabric, not have the fabric come to it already put on. So I'll measure it and then I'll make it nice and flush. I'll cut a hole and then glue it. And then when you mount your tank, if you look down here, let's see, you see the passenger side outer seat belt tab is going to interfere with the tank. So what some guys do is they either make tabs to slide this tank over, or they just go down and bend it. I think I'm just going to bend it. I'll have to remove this tank first and then bend it. Make sure your elevator is rigged and locked down. You can see I'm using that green, I forget the name of it, green stuff to make sure, to show me that I've tightened those and that they're locked down. Reason being is once part of the rigging, you can kind of see it back there, the midway, I forget the name of it. You're not going to be able to get to that when it's covered, and you have to mess with that in order to get proper stick deflection with your elevator. So rig your elevator first. Some mistakes that I've made: don't lock your butt ribs down if you plan to cover them, and it even says it in the manual, and I'm kind of kicking myself. It's not hard, you just pop these mounting rivets off, the whole thing will come off, I can cover it and stick it back on. But little oopsies on my part, don't make my mistake. Paint, a lot of questions about the paint. I plan on covering or painting from here all the way in, mainly because I used superfill. You can see it poking through, and when you cover this portion, you have to split the fabric in order for it to hit the different angles, or it's just going to pull and you'll have like a place where it's not mounted. So I tried going back with finish tape. You can barely tell. Didn't really do anything. I still had to cut and split here. So I'm just going to paint it. Paint the inside of the windows too, so it's all nice and black and uniform, so it doesn't look like that, because that doesn't look good. Paint. So there's, when you're reading the manual, it's kind of fuzzy on what paints that you can use. You can use Stewart systems. I think you can use polyfibers paint, and then you can use house satin paint, and you can also use Krylon. like regular spray paint, like good quality spray paint. And believe it or not, I'll show you close-ups. This is a completely flat black paint. And it is painted with Krylon. Why would you use cheap spray paint on an airplane? Functionality. The tail gets beat up the most. I don't want to spend $500 on a tail and paint and have to worry about rocks coming up and chipping the paint and destroying it. So functionality. If I take rock chips, I just bust this out, paint over it, and I'm good to go. Well, questions are, is that paint gonna last? I have done test hits with I've done enamels, acrylics. I didn't do the satin because I didn't want to deal with mixing the satin and rolling, you roll it on. So I did test hits with different edge tapes, figuring out which tape was the best, and different paints, and I put that through hell. I scratched at it with keys, fingernails, I wadded it up, stomped on it. This stuff isn't coming off. So that's a cheap alternative. That tail is painted with, I think I did 10 layers, 15 bucks. And I think it looks pretty fantastic. So other than that, that is my update for Oratex. So the rudder's next, and then I can paint it horizontal after that, and then finish taping the elevator, and the tail is done. Just have to do the inspection panels. And then the wings, I need to run the pitot and the appropriate hoses, and I'm gonna make lower brackets for the slats, or mounting surfaces, I guess you could say, because you already saw the other video where I put tabs on the top, like right there, for the screws or rivets to go through, so you have a nice big chunk to mount to. So I'm gonna do same thing. I'm gonna do aluminum, probably like right there. Scuff this up, high sol it, and then put the aluminum strip down and then blend it on either side. So when you cover it, it's not just sticking out. And then I'll take care of both sides. So when I put the slat bracket on, it'll have a nice solid mounting area to mount to and won't have any problems with it. So I don't feel comfortable mounting the fiberglass and then potentially drilling into the spar. I don't want to mount to the spar. What else? Apex. I am ditching the idea of the Apex. Had a lot of thought. Yes, it would be fantastic to have 160 horse, but where I live, you go and you look around and you don't see really anybody running unproven systems. And I'm not saying it's not going to work. I don't want to be flying across 15 minutes of 34-degree water or up on the North Slope or in the Alaska Range with something in the back of my head, is this engine going to get me there? So it kind of affects the way you fly. I want full 100% confidence in the engine that I'm going to be running. So I have gone back to my original idea of Hot Rod 0200. It is on paper 220 pounds, but that includes the original starter and generator. I'm going to run a lightweight Skytech starter and whatever light alternator. I don't need more than probably 20 amps because I'm going to have minimal avionics. This plane's going to be super basic for weight purposes. And I'm going to do 9-to-1 pistons, flow match the ports, and I'm going to do 4-to-1 exhaust. The exhaust on small Continentals robs a lot of horsepower because each side fires sequentially. So when your number 3 fires, it pressurizes the muffler, and so when your number 1 is trying to fire, it's running into a higher volume of pressure, robbing horsepower. So 4-to-1, custom exhaust. PMAG, I'm gonna run 1 PMAG until I gain enough confidence in the PMAG to run 2, but for now just 1, and then 1 Bendix mag. I haven't decided on a 2 or 3 blade propeller. I do know I want to eventually move to an Airmaster in-flight adjustable, but finances dictate otherwise for right now because it's like $11,000 for that thing. So I'll probably just run a 75-inch 3-blade Whirlwind and call that good. So since I'm not going with the Apex, and I originally talked about using Brian Dacus's AEM engine monitoring system, I'm going to switch that out with a Dynon EMS D10. It'll show all the parameters that I need to make sure that the engine's happy and healthy. So it should be around hopefully 130 horse at hopefully 205 pounds between the PMAG, the starter and alternator, and the exhaust. I should be, well, not including the exhaust because that's not taken into consideration, but hopefully 205, 210 pounds, which is fine for me. That's still not crazy in a Kitfox. Some guys will say that it's too heavy, but just, I mean, 180 horse Cubs up here, their tails are super light and they're doing just fine. So that is pretty much everything that I have for an update. So thanks for stopping back by and waiting, I think, what, a month since the last time I posted a video. I will post another video with the tail feathers done and hopefully with the wings covered. And hopefully I'll have an engine too. I'm gonna overhaul the engine myself. Those things are super simple. I'm not gonna do the flow matching myself. I'll send that off. But other than that, that's all I got. So a little bit different to what your traditional Kitfox is being built with a Rotax and whatnot. But I'm gonna stick to wanting to build it for a purpose built. So I will talk to you guys later. Thanks.